All right, in the last video, we were doing a lot of trim and drip cap, that kind of thing on the outside of the camper. But now it's time to move to the inside. And the first thing that I need to do is get some power to the camper. So we're going to start there, and that's what this week's video is going to be about. Okay, the first thing I needed to do was drill an access point through the front of the camper. And it's funny, you don't think that that's going to be a difficult thing to do, but it's kind of tough to put a hole through a nicely finished camper. And so what I did was I started on the inside, and I got about halfway through, and I had the center, had a drill bit that poked all the way through, so I could use that as a guide from the outside, and then I finished it off from the outside. And by doing it that way, it eliminated splintering and shards coming off, so it was a lot cleaner. And here I've got my power inlet, and this is actually two different components. I've got one, the black rubber portion with the male end of the connection, and then I've got an exterior waterproof cover that I kind of went through. That way I can actually use this when it's raining or other kinds of weather. And there's an access point at the bottom, so when you close the cover, it doesn't interfere with the cable at all. And here you can see an example of that. I've got an extension cord plugged in, and the cap is completely shut, and no issues. And then it's the male end of the extension cord that plugs into the camper, or the female end, and the male end just plugs in any open power outlet that you can have access to. So that is how I connect the camper up to shore power. So here's what it looks like on the inside, and I've got all those screws coming through, and I'm going to want to clean that up. But for now, I've got that going through a junction box where I'm actually tying that into my interior wiring. And I've got this very first outlet that is just directly above the junction box, and it's a GFCI switch. And I've got a lamp plugged in just to test that my continuity is good, and it is. So from there I'm going to start going to each of the next outlets. So I've come over here, and I've actually got one below the egress window, and that's going to be inside the electrical storage box, and that's just going to be inside a bench that sits over the wheel well. And then from there I go up above the egress window, and I've got that outlet there just in case I want to mount a TV in that location. There will be a wall just to the right of that outlet where I could mount a TV. It's not there yet, but I haven't finished framing out the interior. And then I come over here to the left of the egress window, and that's going to be the sleeping area. And I thought it'd be nice to have an outlet there to plug in an alarm clock or a reading lamp or whatever. And then from there I went down through the storage area to the other side, so that there's an outlet on both sides, and that's what you can see here. And again, I plugged in my lamp all the way along that route just to make sure that each of the outlets was working properly. And here I've been working at night, and I've just got a little lamp here. It's not as dark as it looks in this picture, but I was running an electric heater through those outlets, and that pulls quite a bit of power. So I wanted to both test that I wasn't going to break breaker, and that would do a good job of heating up the camper. And it heated that camper up really fast, and it was pretty cold out. It gets cold at night in Utah. Okay, so here I went back and I wanted to clean that area up. So I backed off all of the screws that are holding the inlet, and I placed this backer plate here and screwed it and glued it to that front panel on the camper, and then I screwed everything back in. So that kind of gives it a better area for driving the screws, and it just cleans it up. Okay, and here I've got my batteries sitting here, but that's not going to be where they go. I'm actually going to have them over above the wheel well where I've got that electrical box is going to be built. And this is the location where I'm going to have the bathroom area, and I just kind of took some scraps and threw them on the floor just to get an idea of how big the bathroom area is going to be. And that bottom piece of 2x2, that's actually going to be where the wall goes that's going to close in that area. And I'll be, if I do hang a TV, it'll be on that wall. And the bracket that I put on the outside, the grab bar, it came in a set of 2. So I went ahead and installed the second one on the inside of the door so I could have something to grab and close the door with. Okay, now I've started to insulate the interior, and this is 3/4 inch styrofoam, and I've got that up against the exterior wall, and then I'll come back once I get all of the styrofoam installed. I'll cover that with Reflectix. So I've got this entire wall is done, and this is the wall that's next to the door. And here you can see I've started to put the Reflectix over the styrofoam. And the reason why I'm doing that, the styrofoam by itself is R3, so it's not very high, and the Reflectix by itself is R6. But when you combine those two, and if it's installed correctly with the proper air gaps, it actually provides R14. And to get R14 out of a 2-inch thick wall, that's pretty good. Now this was right on the Reflectix package, so if it's accurate, then that's fantastic. Okay, now I've got that one wall completely done with Reflectix, so that kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like. Okay, so now I've got to work on siding for the interior, and you can see here I had a ton of leftover scrap pieces from the cutoffs of wrapping the exterior skin. And the whole time I was skinning out the camper, I was thinking, man, I've got a lot of waste, and I didn't feel good about that. So then I came up with the idea of using this and ripping it up into 5.5-inch strips and kind of doing a faux shiplap for my interior siding. And here is the first piece, and this one had a couple of cuts. I had to cut around the wheel well and then cut around the framing that goes underneath the kitchenette area. And I'm starting to I completely wrapped the wheel well, and I'm starting to go up the wall. And here I've got up to the level where I'm going to have my bench, and I've actually started to frame out the bench just by placing the first board up against the wall, and I've put my siding up to that point. Okay, I've continued on up and started to wrap around the window. And what I had to do here was loosen the window so that the trim, I could pull the trim back slightly, just enough to get underneath the trim so that it has a nice finished appearance. And I'm continuing up, and I'm getting ready to wrap around that first, or actually the last outlet in the camper. And I've made it up beyond the outlet, and I've got the outlet plate back installed, and it looks pretty nice. So here you can see I've got that entire wall finished, and that gives you an idea of what that faux shiplap is going to look like. And you know, this was just scraps that I was going to throw away. And I've got both a lamp and I've got my heater plugged into that last outlet, and it's doing just fine. Okay, here's the other side, and you can see that the Reflectix was starting to fall out, so I just taped it up with some painter's tape, and just to hold it in place. And I've also started to run my DC wiring because I need to get all of my DC wiring in place before I put my siding on. Okay, so I've got the bottom portion on that side done, and I want to get that done completely all the way around, including the back and the front, before I start going up the sides. And here, this is the wheel well. This is where I'm going to be placing the batteries, but you'll see in a minute that the battery doesn't quite fit in this location without covering up the outlet. So I was going to have to build out another platform that was deep enough that I could turn the batteries to a 90 degrees so that it actually fit. So here you can see I've got the platform built out, which makes it deeper, and I was able to take the battery box and turn it so that there is enough room to fit next to the outlet. Okay, I've started to insulate the front area near where the kitchenette's going to go, and that's just a scrap piece of plywood that's laying there, but you know, there will be plywood in that area eventually, but that's just a piece of scrap that I'm using it as a shelf. And this is the back, and doing the same thing. And again, I've got a scrap piece of wafer board in the back, using that as a shelf. Okay, I've got my Reflectix installed in the front, and I've actually started to put some siding in that area. And I decided to use the wafer board. I think I've got just enough to finish out both the front and the rear sections under that shelf. And those are going to be storage areas. And there's the back. I've started going up the back as well. Okay, so I've finished the front, and still have some exposed areas on the top and bottom, but that'll be finished out with trim. You'll never see that. And that's as far as I was able to get this week. So stay tuned for the next video where we will finish out, well, at least we'll continue to work on the interior siding. I don't know if it'll get done or not, but stay tuned for that. And we'll talk to you guys later.